Hello, everybody, and we're live. Thanks for joining me again tonight, where we're going to discuss the housing crisis in Ireland. And I think you might have a rough idea of where I'm going to go with it, but you know what? I think there are some nuanced things to add to the discussion tonight about how it's going to affect the young generation in Ireland. By young, I mean, look, anything under 35. It's one of those things that everybody's talking about, and yet I think nobody's really talking about the gravity, the magnitude of the situation. And it might sound a bit depressing as well. Sorry for that. But you know what? We'll watch some videos, have a look at some material, see if there's any levity to be had in it. We'll see about that. But yeah, there's I've had a lot of thoughts in the last week about this, coming from multiple kind of directions. There was the Electric Picnic Festival. Was it this last weekend? Just gone, I think. I'm not sure. Maybe it was previous to that. But the Electric Picnic Festival, which was a lot of young Irish people out having a good time, and it sort of got me thinking. Seeing them in such a crowd reveling got me thinking about how in trouble they might be. I can even look at my own situation, which is relatively, I think, on the scheme of things, not too bad. I have a house. I'm lucky to have one and stuff, but there's even nuance to that that I want to talk about. Even people who have houses, there can be issues and problems with that slightly. I'll get into that a little bit. Look at some statistics. It's very exciting, and some sort of comparisons, historical comparisons as well, that I think are relevant. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that I want to paint a picture from a few different angles, and if you bear with me, I'll kind of get that going. So this might seem obscure, but just work with me. So something I've known for a while now, but I put it out on Twitter tonight just to kind of have it all in one place. A while back, I began researching. This seems really tangential, but East Germany. I was very interested in that for a while, and I discovered this fact a while back that after the wall came down in the early 90s in East Germany, there was a fertility collapse unlike any in human history. And I have this kind of working theory on that. The idea of liberal capitalist precarity and alienation coming in, affecting a place so badly that it affects the people there, not just the society, but almost the organisms within the society. It's got a zoological level of effect on people, such that it affects fertility. So like from 1991 to 1992 alone, it declined by 35%, declined by 60% over a broader range of years. And that's an extremely remarkable thing. You didn't even see that in Japan under blockade, firebombing, and nukes. And it's just a very relevant, interesting thing. And I believe it was liberalism and precarity. People, of course, in East Germany were sort of housed. There's criticisms of East Germany, but they sort of all were more or less guaranteed a house. Everything was sort of stable. They knew it. It wasn't perfect. It had its problems, but it was a society that people understood and could sort of rely on somewhat, even for all its faults, in terms of the basic things like housing, jobs, etc. And the opposite to that is the likes of liberal capitalism, globalism, all this kind of flux, change, precarity has this negative impact. So that's sort of something to sort of set the stage. The idea of being within a radically transformed society and the effect it can have on the most fundamental animal level things, such as fertility decline. We're talking declining by 10 percentage points year on year, stuff like that. I should have this one here now. It's not quite organized as I might like it to be here. So this is Ireland's birth rate dropped. It dropped. What did it drop by? It should be here. So, where's the number? I just pulled open this article. The fertility rate. Yeah, so an annual drop of 13.5% in 2022. So we're looking at huge levels of decline at the moment, and it's not a surprise. You can look into that statistically, but it's something we all see around us. Why people can't get houses, right? They can't live, they can't afford to live, and thus you're not going to have children. But anyway, I'm sort of painting my picture a little bit awkwardly to start with, but we'll get there. Anyway, while I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about what happened in East Germany in the early 90s. I'm thinking about that fact. And I'm also thinking about the housing crisis in Ireland, so-called, and how bad it is. I see it around me. I experience it. And then I look at something like Electric Picnic, where there's a bunch of young Irish people out reveling, and it's great, right? I've been there loads of times when I was young and stuff. And they're listening to the Wolf Tones.
We're on the road again. We're on our way to paradise. We love the jungle tea.
So everybody's looking at this thinking, look at all these young Irish people listening to rebel songs. And of course, that is like, there's a lot of foreigners and stuff in Ireland, but that's going to be a predominantly Irish crowd at this, right? This is their little party that they get to have. And they're singing Up the Ra. Right, and they're having a great time, and they're also saying Free Palestine, and God bless them, I agree with that. And they're having their moment, their sort of Sinn Féin-ish kind of moment, where they're like, fuck the system, get the American soldiers out of Ireland, kneecap and all that. They're saying that. And it just reminds me of this. It reminds me of this, and we'll get on to like this things in Electric Picnic where people are talking about the issues of the day and all this kind of stuff, the political side of it. But it reminds me of this video by Mark Stein. He's a political commentator. This was several years ago. It was after the Orlando shooting terrorist attack. This guy Omar Mateen, ISIS or something like that, shot up, like, I think it was a gay club or something, some sort of club in Orlando. And Mark Stein gave a sort of a eulogy almost to the people that had been shot there, like dozens of people killed. And he talked about how the revelers were out there. It's a very good video, actually. He's talking about how these people were reveling, these sort of libertines, dancing away. And meanwhile, there was this sort of civilizational threat that kind of has the West by the balls. And they were reveling, and it sort of came in on top of them in reality. And the phrase he used was that this club was going on, and this guy came in, and the phrase he used stuck with me, and it sticks with me to what I'm talking about tonight. He said that I think he said they danced as they died, or they were dead as they danced. And when I look at the reality for young people in Ireland, I sort of get that feeling when I look at this. And I'm not trying to be a Grinch, people having a good time, God bless them. Just under the circumstances, there's something sort of strange about this rebellious, youthful attitude at the festival, singing Up the Ra and singing Free Palestine and all that, and fuck the banks and fuck the housing crisis and fuck Fine Gael and all this. And it's like, yeah, but you're not, nothing's changing. You're not addressing what's going on. You seem to not have the ability to. You're completely politically castrated. And you see it with these videos here. Of course, my computer starts to freeze up on me again, as always. I mean, come here. I'm trying to change tab and it's not doing it. Kind of messes up my flow a little bit. Anyway, what I'm trying to get to is these interviews of people at Electric Picnic talking about what matters to them and the rest of it. It's such a pain in the hole. I kind of have it here, do I? I had it and then I lost it.
Well, I think housing,
Climate change, disability and access, housing,
climate.
There's a general election coming. So what's the one issue that really matters to you?
The rent prices and affordable housing for everybody.
I suppose student accommodation.
Okay. Computer spazzing out a little bit. Yeah. 40 tabs over, yeah.
Like, friends, like, we find it so hard to find somewhere. Like, come September, everyone's like, where do we live?
It's a really big issue for people that can't get any housing or can't afford to buy a house. I'm in the position now, myself and my partner are actually planning to emigrate later in the year. Obviously, there's a lot of people.
This is gay.
The last generation of people who have emigrated from
Hopefully
Ireland.
it'll catch up
I'm
now.
always really concerned about the climate crisis.
We always need to think about the future and like our future children and if they'll have a world to live in.
I feel like the cost of living is really important to me. It's such a big issue, not just for students, but everyone living in the country.
I can't afford my rent. I can't afford my electricity bill. I can't afford my food shopping.
There needs to be more like
places like Astros and basketball courts to keep the children out of trouble. Well, I think housing.
Climate change.
So God bless that young fella, especially at the end, talking about needing more astroturfs and stuff for young people. So it's kind of thing you do when you're at like some sort of school or college event and you're asked. I mean, it's the classic. You're asked about what the issues are, and you basically the answer you give is the answer you think you're meant to give, right? That's the kind of totalitarian sort of political thing going on there, where you say climate crisis, and then like classic, we need more basketball courts or something. We need them programs, as if that's relevant or like germane to the real issue at all. But and the other thing is, of course, anyone who's mentioned immigration in this video lineup were, they wouldn't have been included, right? If someone said like get them out, it obviously wasn't going on their newsreel. But you also have these sort of political. Just trying to get my computer to relax its cacks a little bit. You also have these political sort of these here it is actually. These political panels, so the likes of Rory Hearn and all these people, what's his name? Blind Boy and these types. So they're brought on to discuss, they're meant to be like the radical youth or something like this, right? They're brought on to discuss what they think the issues are in some way. And it's just absolute mindless gobbledygook, obviously. And I just feel bad for the whole thing. We'll get on to like this statistics of how bad it actually is for them.
In Ireland. That was the thing as well when we were growing up. Like your parents wouldn't know who like their best friends were voting for. They weren't talking about it. They were like, oh no, that's their business. So when asking them that.
We can be very proud of our history, our standing in the world, our resilience throughout the years and stuff like that. And I think that's really, really important. Like we have a lot more in common with people from the global south who are coming into this country, and they will have a lot of those shared values as well.
Our generation, we're predominantly well-educated people, and I think there's an empathy in Ireland, like a collective empathy from traveling to the States and other places. I don't think that's there.
But I think people now are like, but why? Like, I want to know what your take is. I think we're much more open to what people have to say rather than, just kind of internalizing our kind of thoughts, morals and values.
I think that's what we need to tap into. I think we're listening a little bit too much to the naysayers and the negative people who are, sharing a lot of this that we don't need to hear. A lot of this racism, a lot of this xenophobia, a lot of this transphobia, homophobia, whatever it is. Do you know what I mean?
I think the majority of people in Ireland are good. We know what we want. And I still think we're this socialist country that cares about the collective good. I think we care about people here.
I mean, what sort of absolute trash is that, right? So, when you think about, I share glowing, not glowing, but like a great example of the opposite to this, which is like, think about these people are sat down for, I assume, a paid corporate sponsored panel type of thing. To like, if you replay that, find it and replay it, it's like there was like nothing intelligible said out of any description there. Same with the Vox Pop, excuse me, of the random people. But of these are meant to be the political voices, right? You have as well. You have one here where Rory Hearn is talking about the housing crisis. I'll show you it a bit bigger here if it'll open up. But there's a picture here, sort of, to me, is like defines the state of the controlled discourse in Ireland. You have on this couch here, and they're being interviewed by whoever they are. You have, I don't know his name, but he's your man in the Late Late Show who said it's the people in the suits, not the people in the tracksuits we should be after. And, oh, we're disempowered and stuff like that. The kind of vague, nebulous voice of a generation so-called thing. He does voiceovers and stuff. He alternates between a posh and a like working class accent. Then you have James Kavanagh, the gay influencer guy. And then you have Rory Hearn, the fake housing expert type of person who believes immigration has nothing to do with anything. And it's just, when you think about it, in that previous video I played, the gobbledygook, and then you compare it to, like, if you were to say, oh, well, maybe those are the only voices out there. Think of someone like Keith Woods, right? Global sensation online on X and all that. Deeply knowledgeable about so much stuff, well able to talk, very lucid, all that. And, he could be sitting there along with a lefty or whatever, a mix of voices talking about this stuff. but it's just these people. In this picture, you have in the background, so they've set up their professional operation is set up. I really need to get this new computer. It's set up like it's got these random clippings, like a collage of headlines and stuff behind them. Jesus, it is, pardon the blasphemy there, but anyway, but it's like all the stuff about Palais and like you have flag, climate emergency, white silence is violence, beyond fake news, all this, like it's nauseating, this anyway. But so while this is going on, while we're treated to this sort of Walking Dead fest, the electric picnic. So okay, half of them are going around on yokes, sort of idealist so-called political voices or whatever, and it's sort of, they're in big trouble objectively. Some of them will be fine, they'll get great houses and live well, but that'll be a very small amount. So yeah, someone there says Hearn is a grifter of the highest order, King Baldwin. Yeah, it's very true, but let's just look at some of the sort of stats on this. And most of you will be somewhat familiar with these anyway. And I am closing tabs. There's that EU study finds that 40% of people aged 25 to 34 and in employment still live with their parents. So that's 40% of that age and in employment, working, right? So you can obviously split that, like from 25 to 30, I think it's 75%, and then it declines a bit after that. But still a lot of people around my age, I'm 33, will be living with their parents. I know many of them. And we have as well here that, this is a recent one, Ireland's population is now growing 4 times faster than housing delivery. Now, they try to act like it's a mix of natural growth and immigration. Obviously, it's not. It's mainly immigration. Natural growth is sort of debatable and negligible, we'll say. It's all immigration. Here's one as well. It's quite kind of crazy. Couples on 107,000 can only afford homes in one of 5 counties. So they took an example of a garden nurse with 10 years of service, a combined income of 107 grand, and tested for these 5 counties: Cork, Galway, Meath, Kildare and Wicklow, which are a good sample because that's kind of where the jobs are. Cork, Galway, Meath, Kildare, Wicklow. Meath, Kildare, Wicklow basically being Dublin, and then Cork and Galway, or Dublin commuter zones, let's say. But yeah, this couple, average couple, sort of on 107 grand, looking for a 3-bed semi-D, they could only get a house in one of those counties. They could only in Meath. Now, of course, probably a lot of the ones they could afford to buy in Meath were like Oldcastle and Kells and like the far side of Meath. But anyway, regardless of that, even with Meath, it was only with the support of the First Home Scheme, is so called, right? And I actually looked up the first, I don't really know what it is, one of these Mickey Mouse schemes. But I looked up the scheme, and this is just an amusing side note for you, that the scheme sort of web page has got 3 reviews on it. People who decided to kind of review it. And you see that the reviews are from Luke Wang, Lukasz Stanislavski or something, and Jalal Doctor. So it tells you a lot about these things. Of course, schemes like that are being gamed up by a lot of foreigners in various ways. Someone says the audio is knackered. Okay, well, then Roddy says it's fine. So I'll go with Roddy. But it's like these sort of help to buy schemes and all this nonsense, really, as far as I can see. A lot of it is being gamed. Apparently, the cost rental thing is being gamed by a lot of Indians. I'm not sure how. It's very complicated at the cost rental scheme, but it's scheme after scheme. But they're open to the whole world, these schemes, and even with those, as I say, this couple on 107 grand could only afford in one county a gaff. Now, bear in mind, that's a couple on 107,000. Like, yeah, it's a garden and nurse, and they're no great shakes or whatever, but that's still doing pretty well. A lot of people are single. A lot of people don't work in Tesco's, whatever. Enough jobs like that, and 10 years behind them as well to like save up their deposits and work up their incomes. Like their incomes weren't like that on day one, obviously. So it took them a long time to get there. But that's like, you have to actually dwell on how bizarre that is, that you're on 100 grand and you're looking at basically the housing crisis. You would think the housing crisis exists for a certain segment of society who are somewhat like squeezed middle, way at the bottom, something like that, like right down to the wire, as close as you can get to social housing income that would justify you for social housing, but not being that, something along those lines. But no, you have people who are on 6 figures, 100K, looking around sort of counties that aren't even Dublin, and they can barely afford to get a house. They would be like having to sort of really dance around it to get a house. Now that's bad, because of course that's your model couple. Like your model couple are two sort of nice healthy jobs like garden and nurse, and they've got it all together and they haven't made a couple of mistakes along the way and the rest of it, right? And they haven't built up loads of debt. And that's the other thing, is that this study might not account for people who were forced into taking bad car loans over the years and this and that and the other, had health problems or whatever. This is taking a model couple on 100 grand, and they are subject to the housing crisis, very extremely subject to it, where they could be really, really struggling. And also, even if they do manage to eke out a house, God knows where it is. Maybe they're not from Meath, right? Maybe they're actually from somewhere else. Maybe they're from Dubs. Maybe they're from Kildare. What are they sort of supposed to do? And then you have the journal here, back to the like feigned ignorance thing, where they're asking, how is it possible that red hot house prices are going up and up? Now, of course, we're hearing a lot about Irish emigration. So Irish people are leaving the country in their droves. The birth rates are crashing. And you still have the journal here with crashing birth rates and rampant Irish emigration. And they're asking, how is it possible that red hot prices are going up and up? Now, they're not asking, how is it possible that prices are going from a stable, reasonable position to a higher position? They're asking, how is it possible that prices that have already soared beyond imagination for years and years, compounding and compounding and compounding and compounding, how can those still be going up? Which is a different question. How can you be at the absolute peak of what's even possible, what anyone could possibly afford? This has to pop. There's no way it can continue, and yet it keeps continuing. How can that be possible? Scratching our chins, we have no idea. Yeah, and we know the answer is immigration, obviously, but my problem is the sort of and it's hard to emphasize the human cost of this as well, because it's all just stats and articles and stuff. But you have here on Reddit, right? So now we know Reddit is very controlled because they banned dissenting ideas from it. They shut it down at night after Adam Noonan was stabbed. That was a whole thing. It's a rigorously controlled thing, so fair enough. But you have one of these Reddit page things. I don't really understand how Reddit works, but they say, how bad can the housing crisis get? And they talk about how bad it is, and just asking, how bad can it get? And I went through all these comments, and people claiming to be big experts talking about the, how it's going to affect economic growth and infrastructure deficit and increased supply and FDI, all these random like boffin terms they're putting out there. And yet none of these big brain Redditors somehow come across the idea of immigration. None of them say, you know what? Perhaps, given that this is the situation, bringing our foreign population in Ireland alone increasing 250,000 just in 2022, 250,000, 5% of the population, mostly made up of the age demographic of people who need housing, right? So it's not like babies came in or people came in who could go live with their granny or whatever. No, it's a bunch of people, mainly aged 18 to 40, who have no connection, or well, not many connections here possibly, and need a fresh housing unit for themselves of some description. That's a nuclear bomb, right? Obviously. And we know that our population, our fertility is in decline. We know that Irish people net are emigrating. So it's just, I feel like I'm insane talking about this all the time. And yet I look around me and I look at the electric picnic lineup of, voices of a generation. I look at Reddit. I look at the journal article saying how could this be possible? And it's just like, it just feels like, am I actually going insane? But then on the other hand, I'm closing tabs here, by the way, just to try and get things moving better. On the other hand, you hear about 80% of all these stats and stuff, like 80% of Irish people are against mass immigration effectively. So in another sense, the Vox Pops at Electric Picnic and these articles, it's all fake, it's all layered on. And yet, again, that is the voice. That's what's being said. And I am here stuck on YouTube and I'm not at Electric Picnic at the thing. And it's Rory Hearn talking about how it's nothing to do with immigration and we should welcome people and all this. So we just have this kind of Potemkin like narrative going on. It's a complete Potemkin narrative where it's completely detached from any real person's voice and any real solution that could even debatably come anywhere near solving this problem. And it is just as simple as that. Like the simple thing, the way, like and I know, like Last Rugel's there in the chat, right? So I know you talk about how supply is an issue as well. I hope I don't want to mischaracterize you, but you kind of say like, demand is obviously key, it's massive, but supply is an issue too. I get that, and I agree with that it is an issue, but the way I always put it, I think you probably don't disagree with me here. We probably agree, but the supply stuff sort of like you sort out the demand problem or stem that, and then the supply stuff. Two things can be true at once, but you sort out the demand stuff first, and then the supply stuff also can happen in conjunction with that, and that would be great. But to me, sort of, if you had to put a value weight on supply or demand as the chief problem, the two things are, of course, totally linked up together, because like they basically, like as the newspapers always say, is that we have a lack of supply to meet the growing population, which is another way of saying we have too much demand, right? But the way I see it is like you have to, it's kind of like plugging the hole in the boat, right? You have to do that, because even if you came up with excellent supply solutions and instead of building 30,000 homes a year, which is what they're doing now, you build 60, which is the dream apparently of the government, or let's say 90, let's say 100,000, you do that, but you have a completely open system to the whole world of 8 billion people, with how many billion Indians, who many of whom are rich. All it takes is 1% of India to be very rich and looking to buy property and get over to the West. And they see, obviously they've discovered Ireland in the last few years. The supply of interested immigrants who want to come here will increase with the relief that's made by building new houses. So it's like it's basically like no matter what you do on supply, without addressing demand, it will go nowhere, right? It'll only just sort of run at a standstill, or maybe even still get worse. Whereas if you just stemmed demand, I believe anyway, personally, that even though there's, like, if you stopped immigration overnight, even though there's still a lot of pent up demand and also deport a lot of people to easy pickings, low hanging fruit, people who just obviously shouldn't be here, which is probably numbers in the several 100,000, to be honest. But if you were to get rid of them and stem immigration tomorrow, I just think, based on the speculative nature of the market and the buying up of these assets by multinational corporations and stuff like that, hedge funds or whatever they are, by stopping demand, you would send a price shock immediately, and so many people, so many hoarders and that would sell out and run for the exits, which would cause its own sort of turbulence. But I just think by cutting demand drastically overnight as a policy announced to the whole world, it would undermine the sort of confidence in the housing market as a store of value or an investment. and it would cause a sort of a like a sell off and the rest of it, because the housing market is reading into the future. And then, of course, all these 30,000s that are being built currently would just, I don't know. I think it would just like it to me. It is like the one and not the only solution, but it's just immigration, immigration, immigration. There's no sort of there's nothing else about it really. Build houses, be logical, increase the amount that are built, make them better, put them in the right location. Just be common sense about it. But again, it all has to start and end with immigration. And there's like, there's other problems too. So a lot of, let's say you see these 40,000 people, or sorry, these 40% of people, working people between mid-20s and mid-30s who are living with their mammies. Now, a lot of people my age, right, are living in their parents' houses, and they're basically stacking cash as best they can. Or like there's inflation and stuff, but they're stacking cash because they don't have to pay rent, obviously, right? And they're biding their time. So they might be my age, they might be 33 now, but they're 3 years into their savings blitz, living in their parents, and they're maybe waiting another 3-4 years, and then they're going to buy a house, a proper decent house, even though it costs a fortune, but they've built up enough to be able to do it, right? Savings plan, live with the parents, all that. The problem is that all these heads at Electric Picnic, like when so let's say some of the Electric Picnic people are 22. When right now they're not overly thinking about mortgages. They're still a bit young, and they're still effing around, and they're like want to go off and find themselves in India or whatever. They're doing a bit of that for a few years, but when they rock up to 26, 27, 28, and they get the likes of, they get a biological change, their brain fully develops, they get broody, which I believe happens for both men and women in different ways. There's an age where you start to feel like you might want to have kids, and just kind of settle down, basically. But they'll hit that, they'll suddenly kind of rock up on 27, 28 and be like, oh shit, maybe I should actually save. What am I actually going to do, really? Like, they sort of, they might be renting, or they might realize that they have to also move back in with mammy. But point being, as they become the next micro generation of people to try to buy a house, like when they are in their early 30s and saving money, living with their mom or whatever, or just renting and trying to scrape together a deposit for a mortgage, they're going to be competing not only with 8 billion foreigners, not only that, but also with people who are currently my age, who in the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, when they're like pushing 40, will have saved up close to 6 figures or something, and they are now diving into this horrible housing market. But of course, they've built up, at the very least, like a lot of money, like I say. So you're going to have generations. Basically, what you're having is a generation now of like 30-odd-year-olds who are, who should by now have bought their houses and effed off out of the market, sort of thing. You have your house now, you're gone, right? And now the 23-year-old, when they come of that age, they will be the ones all scurrying around among each other to get houses. But no, they won't be just scurrying around among each other, or a potential 8 billion people in the world who want to come here and are having the red carpet rolled out to them. But they'll also be competing against the 40-year-old who is only buying his house now. You know what I mean? So that's going to be bad. It's going to compound very, very badly in that sense. The other thing as well is that I'll just dwell on that previous point for a sec. Like, the reason I mentioned the Electric Picnic thing and the East Germany thing earlier on is that, like I say, I'm trying to paint a picture where, like, yeah, Elastragale mentions boomers leaving the market as well, could be interesting. Yeah, like, but though also for the boomers who do leave the market and just their houses are like die, right, and their house goes up, the prices for those houses, those, like, a lot of boomers have good houses where they've been like spent like the last 15 years of their retirement or whatever, with like dripping in money. I'm sorry, like, boomers get offended when I say it and stuff, but as far as I can see, boomers out there are just dripping in money. Like, that's just the experience I have. I see boomers who would be considered wealthy. They were like, engineers or whatever. And then boomers who were like bus drivers or spent periods of their lives unemployed and stuff. It doesn't matter what the boomer, all I see is them having a ton of money, and no expenses, and a good pension, all that kind of stuff, and just like living like gap year students or whatever. Like and I don't begrudge people what they have or whatever, but I see a lot of that, and they'll have good houses. They'll have well kept houses, well maintained houses that will, there's 3-4 bedrooms and they're not in the absolute back and beyonds. They're going to cost 400 grand or whatever each and stuff like that. And it's probably going to be Indians buying them. But I just, and of course, all these asylum seekers as well, by the way, these tens and tens of thousands every year of asylum seekers, never mind Ukrainians, they're being put into reception centers, the likes of, what's it called? Thornton Hall, places like that. They're in reception centers, they're in Dundrum Hotel and stuff. But of course, as time goes on, there'll be more of them coming in. They need to go into the reception centers, the new ones, and into Dundrum and all that. And eventually you have to, well, I don't think you have to, but the government do. Eventually you have to put the people who are currently in reception centers will have to filter their way out into houses. They can't be in, tents forever or whatever. They're like, the whole idea is to filter them out into the society and into the labor market and demand market and all that. And so you've tens of thousands of them. You've all these Indian visa people. And then, like I say, then you have the generational stacking, where basically there's like 30 people in their mid-30s not flying the nest and saving up, and then they're going to hit their mark and enter the market when they're like 40 or whatever, and they'll have, they'll be able to get a house for like whatever it is, somewhere between like 300,000 and 600,000-700,000 or whatever, depending on where they are economically themselves. They'll be like diving right into that market. And then the next thing that sort of occurs to me as well is the idea of the market. These are the kind of things that 23-year-olds in electric picnic just aren't thinking about. And God bless them, they shouldn't be, I suppose. But it's going to be very, very real in their lives very quickly. And you can forget about having kids. And that's kind of the point of it. And by the way, I forgot to mention, links in the description if you want to throw something for the stream or whatever, you want to support the channel and me doing this, or you can super chat or whatever if you want. I should have said it at the start, I didn't. So there you go. But there's the phenomenon that I somewhat experienced, but also it could be a lot worse for me. And I'd say it'll just be generationally bad. Something that's going to come up as a matter, and will have to come up as a point of conversation as regards to the housing crisis, which is, say you're looking at a house that previously cost, say you're looking at a house that in reasonably better times, 2013 or something, or whatever, go back a few decades, but just in a reasonable time frame a while back ago, in reasonable times, like I say, would have cost 300,000, right? That house now costs 500,000 or whatever, you name it. And the house that used to cost 500,000 cost 700,000 and so on, somewhere like that, right? It basically the price frame has just adjusted. So like, again, you look at a house, 3-bed, decent condition, not epic, but it's fine, you might have gotten that before for 200,000. Whereas now that actually costs 350, 360, something like that. And so there will be a lot of people out there who, like we see with these 40% of people living at home and people renting and getting absolutely raped for rent, and not able to save, barely able to afford their food and all that, and trying to figure out how they're going to get even like 5,000 saved for an emergency, never mind a housing deposit, and they don't know what to do, right? If a person like that has any chance of ever getting out of this debt trap, basically like a debt squeeze, where it's like there's no, like, you could move in with your parents, but a lot of people have bad relationships with their parents. Their parents are dead, or their parents just don't want them to move back, and they just say no, or whatever it is. But they don't have any of these options, and their income just isn't enough, and they can't just magic themselves into a way better job. It's kind of like, oh, sorry, I wish I was smarter. I wish I was better, that type of thing. There'll be a lot of people who are just like, well, that's not the case. I earn what I earn, and that's it. And they're too busy working and too stressed and tired to like change anything in their lives drastically. So they are where they are, and they're thinking, what do I do? I'm paying this exorbitant rent, way more than a mortgage would be anyway, but I can't save for a mortgage because of it. I can't do anything else. And also, if my landlord kicks me out or like pulls the rug on me at some point, which they inevitably probably will, I might be homeless. Like I might go from being a person who earns like a reasonably humble but decent normal wage, like not a total peasant or a homeless person or whatever. You think, yeah, I'm a normal person. I earn decent money, like, you know, and suddenly you're looking at your tenancy and you're thinking, holy shit, I could be homeless. Like I could find myself in a position where the rug is pulled on the landlord thing. I don't have somewhere in personally where I can go, family or friends, just for whatever reason. And if my tenancy gets pulled, the rents have gone up since I had my lease, and I won't be able to afford the new rents even for the shittest place. And so, what'll I actually do in a situation like that? And then that compounds if that person, God forbid, has kids, right? It's even more stressful and crazy. But what I'm saying is that that person traditionally they would have said, I'll get 200 grand for myself or somewhere like that, right? And I'll get a place that's no great shakes. It's not in the best location. Like it's not a fancy palace by any means. And it's sort of humble. It's not fancy. It's not a big mad new build. It's not got a, you know, whatever American style fridge freezer and, you know, A-rated and all this kind of stuff. But it's in decent nick. And I'm going to get that house and I'm going to move into that and it'll be fine, right? And I'll just live there. Well, what's going to happen is that because I might be belaboring the point here, but because that 300,000 home is now 500,000, if you want to come in for the kind of person I was describing a while ago, want to come in and try and grab something for 200 or even a little bit above that or whatever, well, that is now the equivalent of what a house for back in more reasonable times cost, like 100,000 or 90,000. So basically, instead of getting a half decent or a decent house for that price, you're actually getting what is one or two notches above a vacant home, derelict, sort of dilapidated. It's all right, but what I'm getting at basically is that people could move into houses that before long need rewiring, replumbing, might need a new roof put on it, stuff like that, right? Might just be riddled with stuff like that. And what are people like that who are in a squeeze, who can't afford to rent anymore, basically? They can't afford to do anything. So the best they can do is run and strive to try and get in at that bottom of the ladder. Take what they can get without, you know, just caution to the wind, just, you know, best option, least worst option, right? Just take that. They get into that. Now they're in the debt for it. They're kind of stuck with it. And they've maxed themselves out. You have inflation and the rest of it. And they could be landed with potentially over the years, hundreds of thousands. Like if you get someone in to change a light bulb these days, right? Or whatever, we all know if you can even get someone to do something like, and like any tradesman, you're lucky to even get something, even if you've plenty of money. But if you do, people talk about, you know, getting tradesmen in to do what before used to be jobs you think, yeah, it's a grand or two, you know, or whatever. People talking about tens of thousands for, yeah, you know, jobs like a new kitchen or wiring or something like that. My point is that there will be basically people living in houses that are sort of falling apart and they can't do anything about it. What I'm getting at is that Irish people, the people at Electric Picnic, a lot of them are going to be, even though right now they can surf along on sort of college, and I know they can't get accommodation, but they can kind of get by and just be young and say, I'll go to Electric Picnic, I'll just live my life. You know, you can be carefree when you're young, regardless of the circumstances. But when they hit up on 30, I think a lot of them are going to find themselves, a lot of Irish people are going to find themselves hitting up on Dickensian conditions and they've no idea. And that's what gets me, is that I think things could get so bad for people because of the compounding factors I mentioned a while ago, where this only gets worse. Like journal.ie said, how can the red hot prices keep going up? It's like, no, it could all keep getting worse under the current conditions with the immigration as it is and stuff. It could just keep getting worse. It could get more and more extractive, where basically the person who's trying to find a house, trying to live, is as a cloth, is being more and more wrung out to the last drop. And suddenly things like food even become debatable and stuff like that. And I just don't know you know, you had Ungert de Moor, and you've had human beings go through some very oppressive, very slave-like and horrendous conditions in the past. And there was this idea, I think, that we were beyond it with modernity or whatever. We're still kind of like inhaling that idea a little bit. But I think it's very delusional. And I have a feeling that young people in Ireland sort of have no idea how bad it could get, you know? So yeah, you can live with mammy for extra time, like my current generation are doing. Like a lot of my contemporaries are doing that. I dove in, and that, like I mentioned, by the way, about a house being run down and stuff a while ago. I don't want to be like overly personal or whatever. My house is, I kind of I overthink these things. So I'm bad. I'm always anxious. I'll always consider the worst or whatever. And most people I have to my house, guests and friends and stuff, are always like, "Oh, this place is fine," like, you know, or whatever. But I because I'm an overthinker, I imagine the worst. And now the worst might not happen to me, but there could be easily a situation where it does. I get something looked at and I discover it's worse than I thought it was and stuff like that. And if it's not me, it could be, if I'm lucky enough to dodge that bullet, it could be someone else. And if I see it as a possible phenomenon that I sort of sometimes dwell on and go, I hope I don't end up like, you know, getting bills and bills and bills here, because that could be a bit of a pickle. I know if that's the case for me, it's going to be the case for tens of thousands of people who are buying houses now, who in better times they would have bought a house that was decent to get, but now the standard is getting lower and lower. So people will say, "Oh, it's a disgrace, the housing crisis now. You've spent 250,000 to get a house that's mediocre." What about when you've to spend 250,000 to effectively, like when this worsens, and you've spent 250,000, whatever, in a non-economically active area to buy a hovel? What about when people have to buy houses that are effectively rigged to fail? Houses that, given the cost of materials and tradesmen and stuff, realistically, for the thing to be safe and for it to be fixed, let's say a roof goes in or something. I'm lucky I have a nice roof on my house. But what about when people move into houses like that and the bill is effectively not far off at the end of the day what what they paid for the house, and they're already maxed out, and so then they ring. I'll tell you, out of curiosity, I rang a local councillor because I was curious. Again, I'm not like panicking you out here. I think I'm actually fine. I'm just an overthinker. But as I was oh yeah, someone mentioned defective blocks there in the north as well, yeah, or in Donegal. That's pretty bad too. Yeah, separate issue, or sort of separate issue. But like what I'm saying is that I rang a councillor, and I just, out of curiosity, I was like, so what, like, say for example, the most expensive jobs you can end up having to do in a house, what if I just discovered tomorrow that it was absolutely essential that those things were to be done? There were some things I didn't realize originally or something like that. What would happen if I just this was just basically a journalistic question I was asking him. Like I say, I, at least fingers crossed, hope this isn't actually the case for me, but I was thinking about it. So I said, what would happen if like I had to get my whole house rewired and replumbed or something like that, and I just straight up could not afford it. Like I couldn't get finance for it. I couldn't afford it in cash. Nothing I can do. Like what happens then? Like I paid a decent amount for my house, like, you know, given the housing crisis as it is. So like, you know, again, in better times you would have spent half that, and the other half would go into potential issues. What would I do now that I'm like, if I were tapped out? And he said, yeah, there's basically nothing for that. You know, there's the grants for this and grants for that and grants for all sorts of things. But in a situation like that, you're screwed basically. And I thought, okay, that has to be a lot of Irish people. There's going to be a lot of these millennials and Zoomers, the electric picnic crowd, who are going to be in a situation like that, where basically if they manage to buy a house that's kind of shite, possibly was a council house back in the day that a boomer got, right, even though they worked or whatever, is now going for hundreds of thousands, and then they move into it and it's just not what it says on the tin, like as in it's not what the price might suggest really. In better times, what are they going to do? They're not in social housing, so they don't get any assistance. They're just on their own. it's something I think needs to be talked about more, basically, is what I'm saying. But and again, like I say, those are the lucky ones. So the real lucky ones are the people who are quite wealthy and can afford really lovely houses and whatever, right? That's fine. That's going to be, given the statistics we saw, a small fraction of the generation that are at Electric Picnic. But then the ones who are less lucky, but still considered lucky by the homeless ones and the renters and stuff, of like, yeah, you managed to get into a house, you've sort of set it up. But even they, a lot of them, will be stuck with 100-year-old houses by the time another 10, 20 years comes around. They'll be stuck in old, like sort of really past their prime council houses that they've tapped themselves out on, and trying to figure out what they're going to do. And those are the lucky ones. It's going to be interesting. So I don't know. One of the things I was thinking about as well as boomers, right? So just a brief word on boomers. So they were at, while the millennials, or sorry, the kids, Zoomers, were at Electric Picnic, the boomers were at AC/DC. Now this does look pretty cool, but just another idea here from this. So there's something, I don't know. Again, I'm not begrudging a boomer their concert, right? But you know, when I look at the situation in Ireland, the sort of sell-off of Ireland starting in like the late 90s, early 2000s, the Celtic Tiger and all that, a lot of the way I see it is boomers were bought off in Ireland. Like they basically were. They were told, yeah, like you can sort of ride off into the sunset. Again, like I know a lot of people. I grew up in social housing. I grew up in an estate, and a lot of the people in these estates that I saw, they were given social housing, and they were sort of like, a lot of them were working. Like a lot of them were like a bus driver and someone who works in whatever. I don't know how it worked because I wasn't alive at the time. I don't know how it went down. Like they got these houses in the 70s and 80s or 90s or whatever. But when I was growing up, I had loads of neighbors and friends and stuff like that whose parents had gotten the social housing, and their parents were like working, and they were like what we'd consider today middle class. It was kind of strange, right? And then they were given those houses for a song to buy for like a very cheap price. And then they started like renting out their rooms to students and stuff like that, making money off it. The thing is paid off easy peasy because they got it so handy. And that's those are the ones who were considered like the failures in a sense. I mean, that's what by definition social housing kind of is that you are the class who are so unable to compete in the market yourself that you just have to be given a house. So that was them. You're talking about the most like the lowest boomers are riding high, right? The ones who throughout their lives, it's like whatever you did in your life, no, it's not your fault too badly or anything, but whatever you did in your life, it obviously wasn't, you weren't going out doing brain surgery or making great investments or anything like that, you know, or being highly qualified. You were just doing your thing. For portions of your life, you were probably jobless and stuff. And now you're whatever in your 60s and you have sort of loads of money somehow through pensions and this and that and renting out rooms and just basically having everything paid for and being totally ahead of the curve, obviously. And they're just at their kind of AC/DC concert. And I just see that's the kind of bookending of like a dying society, really, is that the kids are sort of oblivious. They're like going, oh yeah, well, I think like the housing crisis is like really bad and like the climate crisis or whatever. Those are the ones who get a voice on the media. They're saying that, and then the others who actually know what's going on are cowed into silence, and they don't know what to, like, they don't want to be a dissident. Like, you know, it's not easy, put it that way. Coming out and just saying what you think or whatever, for the reasons we all know. But so they can't sort of speak for them. All they can do is kind of say up the rat, the wolf tones, and like, you know, have a good time at electric picnic and go home, and that's kind of it. And again, say like, oh, I think like it's kind of crazy what's going on. And there was an article in the media somewhere. It was a woman in Cork, an art teacher, who was saying, it was an article, basically it's article after article of like vox pops or like samples from random people, like reading the pulse of the people, where it's saying the housing crisis is crazy. You know, I have to move back in with my mom, and I'm like 32, and I've been working all these years, and I've been diligent enough, and it's just gone mad. It's gone mad. And that's what drives me mad. Is kind of going, can we stop just saying it's gone mad? Like, I mean, you're in it. This is some article. It was some art teacher in Cork, right? I'm kind of going, you're a sentient human being, aren't you? Surely, right? Do you not see 250,000 foreigners coming into Ireland in a year and understand that that is, in effect, exclusively the issue, obviously? So you either want to address that or you don't. But like, there's no point going around saying, this is mad. This is crazy what's going on. Oh my God, the government are really incompetent. They need to do better or something. Yeah, that's not it. It's not generalized incompetence, okay? They're very competent at doing what they're doing. They are bringing all these people in to increase the value of properties because that's who they work for. They work for large financial interests, right? And not for you, and that's it. So they know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it very well from their perspective, and they're executing their plan and their agenda perfectly. It's just not yours. You're the joke. You're the butt of the joke, right? But it's yeah, it's bookended with this boomer thing, the AC/DC. I feel like, you know, you've the young people who are in huge trouble and yet can't voice their trouble, and then you have the boomers at AC/DC probably staying €400 a night in a Dublin hotel room, right? And they're thinking, oh well, I'll be dead in a while. I might as well spend what I have, enjoy, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And I do find as well, when you talk to boomers in specific about the stuff going on, like if you say, like if you're someone who says, oh yeah, I'm going to be like homeless, I don't know what I'm going to do, they kind of look at you like, oh well, I figured it out, like, you know, that's being young, you know, you'll have it all together when you're my age, you know, it all comes together. Like, I remember when I was 25 and I was trying to get it all together, the thing they don't mention is that, like, oh yeah, but 5 years later you did have it all together, and it wasn't like you didn't have to like have a fucking existential crisis to get there on the way, and ultimately you did get there. Whereas if you say to the boomer, well, how do you explain that our people get here? Like, it's not the same, you know. I just think most of them, if I'm being totally honest, just don't care. Some do. You might be somebody who might be watching now or whatever, but I just don't think 150 quid a ticket for AC/DC to go, like, to watch some fucking guy walking around, jumping around in shorts, playing a guitar or whatever. Playing look, someone could say, oh, AC/DC is real music and all that. I'm sorry, I don't buy it, right? I do not. I don't mean to be a snob, but I want to watch Bach, right? I want to listen to Mozart and all that sort of stuff a little bit. And I also want to hear, I'd rather hear a random good Spanish flamenco or some sort of, or just interesting random folk band playing in a pub that I've never heard of, but they're kind of good, or they play Irish trad or something, than this sort of band shite, like what's the other one? Keep on Rocking in the Free World. Who's that? Neil Young. And it just makes me sick, to be honest. And I know there's friends of mine who love AC/DC, so sorry, but just the idea that, like, that's almost like a religious pilgrimage. I don't know. People had a good night, God bless them, but you know, seeing these old men playing their guitars, like why not just go to Croke Park and just have like a live show that AC/DC played in the 90s, like played onto from an iPhone into a speaker? Like, why not just do that? Like, who cares, you know? Maybe I'm a Grinch on that stuff, but they're like, oh yeah, but we're all coming together. And then I'm kind of like, well, that's my problem. You are all coming together, and your own progeny, your own national progeny, your kids, your grandkids, whatever they are at this point, are in dire straits. And you're paying whatever it is, 400 quid a night for a hotel room, €150 for your ticket, and your kids are in Australia, or they're here depressed, or they're not having kids, or whatever, they're stuck. And that's not everyone, but it's a lot. And I just think, is anyone serious? Like, is anyone, whether it's the kids, sorry to be the total fucking dry balls here, and I'm cursing now because it's late, but the kids are meant to be the rebellious youth, right? The genuinely rebellious youth. And they're not. They're totally, absolutely cooked out into oblivion. There's no, like, a lot of them are cool or whatever, but the ones who are out there speaking and stuff, they're just totally like impotent. And then you have the boomers who are in the best position possible. I appreciate the millennials and the zoomers can't speak out too much because they're thinking I already basically have a knife to my throat. And so whatever shitty job I have, or good or shitty job, like even if you're working in McDonald's and some state-funded NGO reports you for racism because you opposed immigration to McDonald's, McDonald's will say, sorry, you're too so-called racist to flip burgers and fire you, right? And blacklist you. And your name will be, you'll have some weird Antifa NGO person stalking you, you know, for like the rest of your life, trying to put your name up on Google and destroy you and all that. We all know that, right? So they're kind of thinking, well, things are precarious enough as it is. Like, the best I can do is to keep my head down. But I look at the boomers and I think, lads, you're all like more or less retirement or hitting retirement. You have houses that are paid for, done up to the nines. The wiring and the roofs and all this stuff is fine. You're driving a newish car that you might have even bought in cash in many cases, and you've money stacked and everything's sorted, right? And a lot of your money is pension; it's all guaranteed and stuff. So, like, there's nothing stopping you. Like, if you wanted to, you could come out like blindsiding the narrative, right? If you wanted to, out of concern for the younger people in the country. Basically, you're the generation who got bought off by the system, where you got the easy social houses, you know, or if you didn't do that, you bought a house in 1992 for fucking nothing, and you know, just coast, like, all you had to do was coast through life being normal, have a really ordinary job, and it just kind of fell in front of you. You know, you'd want to seriously be making fucking balls of it, like multiple times, to not just sort of land on your feet throughout that lifespan, right? That's what it was like. And to this day, the boomers are sorted. Someone says get past the generational stuff. No, it is relevant. It is relevant. It does matter. Actually, I think, but like, and I'm criticizing the young as well, and my own generation. Like, I mean, they're just as stuck or messed up in their own way, obviously. But you know, I still can make the points about it. Like, and I don't know. I just think I'm 33. I don't get any huge benefit from doing what I'm doing, and I'm not necessarily doing it for myself. I'm doing it for, like, just speaking out a little bit, right? Starting narratives and, you know, doing whatever I've done over the years. Like, when I do that, it's primarily for my own kids and for these kids at a lecture picnic, as ignorant as they are. I care about that. I don't want them to be absolutely destroyed by Indian immigration and the asylum spoofer things and all of this. Like, that matters to me, and that's important. I don't know. So I just I feel like it's you know, it should be the people who are most in a position to speak out about it should, and that's why the boomer thing is an issue. You know, I don't know. I feel like they're just in like resort mode, and it's all good for them. Like, I'll give you another example actually. So this is just personal stuff, right? But I've mentioned it a few times. I have this kind of ongoing leg injury thing that I'm trying to figure out and get sorted. And I went to, and the reason I do this, by the way, is because I talk about these issues, is because for whoever's interested, you know, I often say that people in Ireland should, like, I know that when I walk around the supermarket, statistically, a lot of people around me are struggling. They're struggling with this or that or the other. They've got a couple of kids and they're in a tenancy and they're afraid they'll get kicked out and this and that, and they can barely make ends meet month to month. All the, like, lots of people, they have to be there statistically, and yet I go out to the supermarket and I'm walking around and everybody's kind of acting like they're fine. And the thing, I often feel like, well, if everybody was more forthcoming with each other, instead of being like, oh, I'm grand and everything's grand, which I think people will do to their death, which is bad, because if people were more honest with each other, there'd be more of a reason for people to get sort of outraged and indignant about it, and sort of start forming a posse, so to speak. It's so that's why I kind of talk about little tidbits of my life. It's not sort of poor me, or because I feel relatively privileged on this grand scheme of things. But it's just to kind of abide by my own to preach as I practice, right? Or to practice as I preach, sorry. The but so like, yeah, so I had this leg thing, right? And I went through Mickey Mouse physios who were just trying to like rip money out of me. And then I went for an X-ray. The X-ray didn't show anything because it just does bones. And I'm kind of going, okay, it's obviously like an MRI thing. I go to my GP and I can tell he's trying to ration MRIs because the system is so overloaded that they have to do this kind of stuff, but they can't just tell you at the face of it. Anybody who's had healthcare system issues will maybe or recognize this, but I get this sort of strange dystopian vibe that like, yeah, okay, so in theory, the best thing for me to do would be to get like 2 separate MRIs or something like that and some other treatment. And like, if you were taking money out of the equation and just saying what's the most appropriate treatment for this patient based on how they present, that would be it. But I'm sort of being told, oh, well, it'd be hard to get an MRI and an appointment with a consultant will take years, and maybe just try some DP, maybe leave it for another few months. You're getting kind of gaslit and you're thinking, this is insane. I know this is the system speaking, where GPs are told to sort of brush people away unless someone's leg is falling off or there's some very obvious thing. If the issue is a bit complicated, just sort of filter them away. And so then I go to, I don't want to name the place, dox myself or whatever, but I say to my GP, listen, enough with it. I'm not insured, by the way. It just never came up. I might do it soon, but yeah, I said to my GP, listen, I'll just pay like cash or whatever. Just this has gone on too long. Like, send me somewhere. So he goes, okay, I'll send you to an orthopedic guy in this hospital. And I go to it. I go to this place, and it's unbelievable. Like, I get in there and I think I would have had no idea. Luckily, I haven't had to access any type of hospital too much in years. But I'd have had no idea this even existed. I didn't even know this kind of thing exists. This kind of hospital existed, full stop, anywhere. And I get in. It's sort of like, I don't know, Stepford Wives or something like that, where what's it called? What's the Jim Carrey thing where he's in like a fake world or whatever? Everything is like serene and lovely. Someone can remind me there. Damn, what's it called? The Truman Show. So, I get in there and it's like the Truman Show. It's like leafy, it's nice. The appointment is at a certain time and I get there and it's at that time exactly. Everything is flush and easy. And I get into the guy and he says, oh yeah, I see. I don't quite know what you have there. It's obviously you have something, but you should probably scan like your knee, your lower leg, and your lower back for a sciatica, and all these are appropriate things straight away. And of course, I'm going to pay for them. But he goes, those are the clinically like appropriate things for you to find out what's going on there. And then he says, if it's this, we'll do that. If it's A, we'll do this. If it's B, we'll do that. If it's C, we'll do the other. And that's sort of it. That's how you're going to sort of get to the bottom of that and fix it. Diagnose and then fix it. And I kind of just start thinking like, okay, so I go to the public healthcare system and they sort of say, I wrangle an X-ray out of them. And they do that because it's easy and quick and cheap or whatever. And then they sort of say, as a unit, as an organism, this overwhelmed entity of the HSE that is sort of designed to try to relieve pressure on itself, that organism decides to say, instead of just saying, listen, bitch, right? We're not actually going to treat you. If something had come up on the X-ray, we would have treated it. If it basically was obvious from day one and it was easy, for the cheap diagnosis tool, then we would have said, like, maybe treated you if there was some fracture or whatever. But if it's any of the more complicated stuff, instead of just telling you, sorry, bitch, it's rationed and you're on your, that's it, right? They kind of go, oh, well, maybe try physio, maybe go off and do this or that, and maybe do whatever, and maybe just fuck off, basically. Instead of saying, well, no, no, you need, obviously the next thing is you need an MRI, and maybe actually you need two. They kind of start scratching their chins, going, well, I can't really give you two, you know. And it's just such a bizarre thing. You're like going, so I can't just, I pay taxes, and I've extremely rarely used the healthcare system. And on the rare day when I, over years, when I go in and say, hey, I finally have something for you, lads, it's just inaccessible. You just can't use it. And in fact, they'll happily waste half a year of your time or whatever bouncing you around the place in order to just not give you the goodies, right? And so then you go off and you spend near on €1,000. This is if you're not insured, right? And if you're insured, you're spending that anyway because you pay for your insurance every year. It's all the one. You spend thousands of euro with this parallel system anyway. So it's kind of like, it just reminds me of like a Mad Max scenario where, you know, if you're someone who does not have great means or limited means, but you're not social housing, you don't get the medical card or any of that, squeeze middle basically, you are in a situation where you can't get a house. And if you can get a house, the house is going to be a hovel that you're in danger in, and you have no money to fix it. And if you say, well, of all these grants and schemes that are in this, which one is for me? They say, none, bitch, right? And then if you need to use the healthcare system and you can't afford health insurance, and you're not as fortunate as I am to be able to just, for the individual instance, to be able to shell it out and just kind of get the thing done, you're on your own. It's like, come back in 3 years for your appointment. You don't have a healthcare system. You don't have a house. Like like I say, it can get very Dickensian very, very quickly for people. And I don't know if many of these electric picnic revelers understand how. And boomers don't understand either, because they're on the other end of it. They're like, oh, youth is crazy. You know, you get it all together. You'll figure it out and stuff. And it's like, no, you figured it out. Yeah. But we're in a different scenario. So it's like the people who are facing into it don't get it. And the older people sort of don't get it. And here's how I tie that previous thought together, is that while I'm in this private utopian hospital place, right? I'm sort of like in a daze walking around looking at it. You know who's in there? Boomers galore, right? And the funny thing is, they're all like, I see like the boomers, like some of them who are like not very amazing at driving, we'll say, like a lot of boomer women maybe. They're like, I'm like trying to get from the car park over to the front door or whatever. And I'm like crossing the road, and then I almost realize I've just about almost gotten ran over because there's I hear this like little a electric car, right? What is it, like I can't do the noise, I'll stop trying, but it's this noise, the electric car noise, and I see, you know, and it's this like little Jeep type of thing, and it's the boomer woman with pearls on or whatever driving by me, almost running me over, and it, you know, disappears around the corner, and it's 242, and I'm going, and it's like loads of these, all like so many of them, and I go in and I'm walking around the sort of ward or waiting rooms or whatever it is, and it's just all like 60-something-year-olds. And I realize they're not all even mega rich or anything. It's just all boomers, as far as I'm aware, have health insurance, good health insurance. And it's not just them, of course, other people do too. What I'm saying is all boomers as a default, because they most generally have spare cash. To them, it's just a default to have health insurance. So when you're running around the place trying to figure out how to get a house, how to put your kid into a school where they're not like a total minority or whatever, and you're in some shitty hospital waiting 15 hours to get seen and 3 years to get an appointment and all this, while you're in that world, and then you go to a boomer and you sort of vent to them, or you say, it's pretty crazy out there, you know, and they look at you like, why you wrecking the vibe, or, you know, that kind of thing. It's because I think they just don't get it. The other thing is like hotels. If you go to like nice hotels where you go for like a scone on a Saturday or Sunday or whatever, go for Caribbean and all that. If you go to a lot of those ones that are sort of slightly out of town, again, it's all boomers in there, and it's all Irish as well, except for maybe the odd member of staff. You go, I see boomers have a parallel society for the most part, in a way that if you're raising kids or if you're just young, you're sort of thrust into it because of economics and just because of demographics and age and different circumstances and stuff. You're sort of thrust into it, whereas boomers have, between their private health insurance, between their leafy house wherever it is, in sort of a mature estate or something like that, and between like, you know, going to the spa and the hotel and this and that and to ACDC or whatever, it's kind of like, yeah, they are living in the society physically, and sure, they're going to brush paths with the diversity or whatever here and there, but they're not going to have a visceral personal connection with it where it hits them in the face, where they go, oh, I actually did wait 3 years for an appointment. I actually did wait 14 hours in a hospital where all the staff were Pakistani and half of the clients or whatever patients there, sorry, are foreigners, and the other half are like dejected, sort of like middle class, younger Irish people. They just didn't see it. They went into this luxury hospital and they were sorted. And so when you go to them and you say, it's pretty bad out there, they're like, understandably kind of going, I don't really know what you're talking about. I have no stake in it really. And they don't take their kids to a playground where all the reproductive age people are. I've said this before, but like when you get in there and you're like, holy shit, I'm the only Irish person there with an Irish kid. And your own kid is looking around at all the like kids talking to their parents and stuff, and they're all speaking different languages, and you're thinking, damn, my kid is 2 and he's barely learning English, and this must be really throwing him because he can't actually learn around him because they're all speaking different languages. And I don't know, I find it hard to even look at him when I'm in that situation, because I think it's indescribable, that feeling. It's very strange. And whereas, so your average boomer doesn't have that. They don't have these things. And again, in a sense, the 23-year-old in Electric Picnic doesn't have it either. So I don't know what the way I see it now is that people think the housing crisis, in conclusion, right? Finally, people think the housing crisis is sort of at this peak where it's as bad as it can be, because they're looking at it relative to 10 years ago when it wasn't so bad, or decades previous to that when it wasn't so bad. And they think, like this Reddit thread said a while ago, at what point is this going to end? And it's kind of like, maybe it's just beginning, lads. Like, did you ever consider that? Because people think, oh, the bubble will burst, there'll be economic pop and all this. Yeah, maybe it'll sort of wax and wane slightly over the course of a couple of years. But in as a general trend, I wonder if it's going to get way, way worse, and the level of desperation that's going to proliferate around younger people now, where that's going to take them and how bad they're going to be, and at what point effectively it leads to a genuinely revolutionary atmosphere, like when all these Electric Picnic heads enjoying, understandably, the Wolf Tones and Up the Ra and Free Palestine and the rest of it, when will they sort of hit the wall and kind of say, when will they get desperate enough basically to sign up to the real revolution type of thing? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I hope I didn't depress the balls off you tonight. Yeah, I don't know. I just, you know what, it's like, who is talking about this stuff? The other thing is, like, I could just come on and sort of take like the latest migrant, and I'm reluctant to do it. Like, the latest migrant shenanigans. Like every day there's 10 videos, red meat I could kind of throw out or whatever. But I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I'm very good at it. But it's like, it's something I don't see a lot of. The nitty gritty of like people's lives, whether it's them trying to get healthcare or trying to get a house or any of the rest of it. I don't see much of that talked about on the nationalist world. I see even Green Party, I was looking at their policies, and they, while I disagree with them, they actually have fleshed out policies on housing, totally misguided, and wrong in many ways and all that. But they have this fleshed out plan. So someone was telling me, oh, they want everyone in A-rated homes by 2030. Bullshit or whatever. But they have this sort of vision for something. And I just feel like in nationalist circles, maybe people just talk about just foreigners and, oh, foreigner fucking did this or that today, and it's like, but what about people's lives as well on top of that? What about the actual fabric of people's lives in the most fundamental ways, like just being able to live, being able to keep themselves going, and where they're going to go from here? So I don't know. I think and to tie it back to the East Germany thing, what I think is going to happen over the next 10 years is a fertility rate decline, that is like up there with the worst in human history in Ireland. Like we saw, four people are going for every house in Ireland at the moment, effectively, because of immigration. And you look at, people say, well, Australia is really bad too, Canada is really bad, all of these other countries, England, etc. They're all really bad. They all have tons of migrants coming in, and they all have like limited, the supply side thing isn't as good. But we see that our rate of people needing a house versus houses, demand to supply effectively, is twice as bad as Australia, which is known as being very bad. Now, I think they're taking in lots of immigrants too. I think one of the mercies they might have is that it's such a large country. I know a lot of it is desert, but it's a large country. And so there's maybe more room to expand around the coast and stuff and do their thing. Whereas Ireland is this smaller island, it's kind of parochial and stuff, so it's difficult. It's harder to bring in, several million people to Ireland than it is to Australia for obvious reasons. Same goes for really a lot of Western countries. So, point being, the mainstream media in Ireland, not me, have said in the last week that even though the housing crisis plural, are really bad across the West, Ireland's actually stands out uniquely, far and above the rest of them, for the reasons we've talked about. And I think that's going to worsen. And I think what we have now, this red hot, how could it get any worse situation, could only be the beginning, perhaps. And that it might lead over the next 10-ish, maybe a bit more years, to what will come to be recognized as one of the greatest social catastrophes. Because I recognize the East Germany one as, if you go by fertility, you take that as a general metric of human well-being. Even though East Germany was one of the worst ever, we can look at Ireland will be seen as one of the worst by those metrics, worst social catastrophes and most rapid in human history, as measured by various metrics, primarily reproduction. That's a very good heuristic. If people just suddenly drop off and having kids, it's not just because they got more modern or something. That's dire straits, right? That's what that is. Precarity, and a shift in your society and the economic situation that is just intolerable for people. But I think it could be really bad. I think that's why I called it Generation Dead, because I think it's where, or maybe I should have called it Nation Dead or something like that, because I think this next 10 years is sort of for many reasons, kind of like the end, unless something changes. But you will have these hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people being brought in, and then the dwindling minority of reproductive age Irish people that are here will just, in effect, stop having children. And not because of notions they have, because they full on can't. They can barely feed themselves. And I'm talking about, like, people in Ireland could start to get, like, there could be like hunger, malnourishment, and all sorts of, like, it could, maybe I'm a doomsayer or whatever, but just based on what I'm seeing, I'm like, well, how else could it work out? Because as screwed as an average 30-year-old now is trying to figure it out, the current 20-year-old, once they reach 30, or where are they at? Well, I could talk further about that, but it's like, the other point I want to make to connect the boomers thing is that boomers were effectively bought off as a generation, and that was my whole point with them. The whole country was sold out, fire sailed off to multinational speculation, the rest of it. And it was kind of, because there was this big boomer demographic, they were sort of bought off. It's like, okay, if you're like on the low end, you could just have a social house. If you're in the medium end, you just get a house and you flip it and maybe buy another one, even if you're like a middle class or whatever. We'll buy you off and send you off into the sunset with your health insurance and your ACDC and your whatever else, right? And your like holidays and all that. Chilling from the age of like 64 or whatever. We'll buy you off. But the funny thing is that you would think, well, maybe for the last hurdle, the last dying gasp, which is millennials and Gen Z, maybe the globalist order would sort of buy them off as well, like just a second buy off. So you just basically do some New Deal, like it was LBJ or FDR, I think it was, like a New Deal, where you say, okay, sort of a once-off jubilee where we're going to effectively put everyone in a gap, basically, See, that's not even possible with immigration. It's not physically possible, but I don't know what they do. Some sort of trick where they sort of somehow up the ante, pave across the whole landscape, build a lot of houses, and put millennials in there and Gen Z sort of for free, and give everyone home retrofit upgrades and all that sort of shit, right? Buy them off. But the funny thing is that even though that might be possible if they really wanted to slow things down, buy off this next generation, then the subsequent generation will be in the hundreds of thousands, tiny. We'll get it done. Like in a 50, 100-year plan, that would make sense. We bought off the boomers. Let's sort of buy off the next generation too. But the funny thing is, I don't think they're doing that. I think it's getting into cruelty mode where they will watch. They'll like burn the ants with a magnifying glass. I think with the millennials and Gen Z and the next ones, they will sort of have them go into absolute penury and like desperation, and just kind of laugh at it. That's what I think it is. I think the only generation to get bought off are the boomers, and that's it. Possibly Gen X as well, kind of did okay-ish actually, because they got all their shit sorted out before 2008. But for the most part, but it's like I do think this next generation are in for. I think could be in for hell. And here's the thing as well. If someone said you're a pessimist, chill it, right? I would say, well, explain to me how I'm wrong, right? Like, oh no, they'll just sort it out, It'll just be as bad as it is now at worst, but it won't be any worse. And in fact, it might be better. It might actually get better. I would be, for anyone in my DMs or in the comments or something, if you can outline an even theoretical scenario where that could be the case, then I'm all ears. But so I don't know. So anyway, that's my thoughts for tonight. I know I could go on and on. Maybe I'll have a guest next time or whatever. It's better to maybe talk about these things in real life to other people. But yeah, I'll leave it there. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining me. What is it? Midnight? Yeah, it's midnight. Okay, go to bed. Thanks again. Ihiwa. See you.